3 days ago, you opened your banking app. The number looked normal, nothing impressive, nothing alarming. Just over $3,400 sitting in checking after your paycheck cleared. You closed the app and went on with your day. This morning, you open it again. Now it says $3,068. You pause, not because the number is catastrophic, but because you can't immediately explain what happened. You didn't buy a television. You didn't book a flight. You didn't walk into a dealership and drive home in a $65,000 pickup truck. So you start scrolling through the transactions. The list looks ordinary. $14, coffee and a breakfast sandwich before work. $27, lunch with coworkers instead of the meal you packed. $19, a small Amazon package that showed up yesterday. $18, gas station snacks during a late drive home. $23, a quick Target stop that somehow included more than you planned. None of these purchases feel like mistakes. They feel like normal life. But as you keep scrolling, something becomes obvious. The transactions keep coming. Another lunch, another coffee, another Amazon order placed late at night while you were half watching Netflix. By the time you reach the bottom of the list, several $100s are gone. Not because of one bad decision, but because of dozens of forgettable ones. That's the pattern most people never notice. If you bought a $3,000 home gym, you would remember it. If you financed a $70,000 SUV, you would analyze it. Big purchases force attention. Small purchases don't. They slip through unnoticed. A few dollars here, a few dollars there, individually harmless, collectively destructive. And over time, those tiny transactions begin behaving like something else entirely. A slow financial leak. One that quietly drains accounts long before anyone realizes what's happening. When people try to explain why they can't get ahead financially, they usually point to the obvious suspects. The big expenses, the expensive car sitting in the driveway, the vacation that cost several $1,000s, the new television mounted on the wall. Those purchases feel dangerous because they're visible. You notice them, you remember them. A $65,000 SUV demands attention. A $3,000 home theater system forces evaluation. A $4,500 vacation booking usually involves days of research. Large purchases activate the analytical part of the brain. You compare options. You debate whether the purchase is worth it. You calculate the cost. But small purchases rarely trigger that same process. A $14 coffee run doesn't feel like a financial decision. A $22 lunch upgrade feels harmless. A $19 Amazon purchase barely registers as spending. It feels like convenience, and convenience has a powerful pattern. Imagine a normal weekday. Coffee on the way to work. Lunch because you didn't feel like eating the meal you packed. A small online order while scrolling your phone at night. None of those moments feel reckless. They feel ordinary. But when that pattern repeats day after day, the numbers change. 3 small purchases per day. Average cost might look like this: $14 for coffee and breakfast, $22 for lunch, $18 for a small online purchase. That's $54 in one day. Multiply that across weeks and months, and something surprising appears. The financial damage doesn't come from the big decisions people fear. It comes from the small ones nobody questions. Large purchases demand attention. Small purchases quietly drain the system. And because they feel insignificant in isolation, they rarely trigger the awareness needed to stop them. The strange part about overspending is that most people never feel like they're overspending. Nothing dramatic is happening. No reckless shopping sprees. No luxury purchases that shock the credit card statement. Just ordinary transactions moving through ordinary days. But underneath those small purchases is something far more powerful than individual decisions. A system. Modern commerce has been engineered to remove every possible obstacle between wanting something and buying it. Think about how buying used to work. You had to drive to a store, walk through aisles, stand in line, hand over cash. Every step created friction, and friction forces the brain to slow down. Now compare that to how spending works today. You see something on your phone, you tap once. The item is on its way to your house tomorrow. Amazon calls it one-click ordering. Food delivery apps save your last order so you can reorder dinner in seconds. Your credit card number is already stored. Your address is already stored. Even your preferred payment method is already selected. The distance between desire and purchase has been compressed into a few seconds. And when that distance disappears, something important disappears with it. Reconsideration. The brain never enters evaluation mode. There's no moment to ask, do I actually need this? Instead, the purchase happens almost automatically. A quick tap while scrolling your phone on the couch. A convenience order because cooking feels like work. A small upgrade because the option is right there. Each decision feels harmless, but the system behind those decisions is not neutral. It's optimized. Billions of dollars have been spent designing platforms that make spending effortless, not because companies want you to think carefully, but because careful thinking slows purchases down. And speed is extremely profitable. Most people believe overspending is a discipline problem. They assume the solution is simple. Just stop buying things you don't need. But if discipline alone solved financial problems, most people would already be financially secure. The real issue isn't knowledge. Almost everyone knows they should spend less and save more. The issue is environment. When spending is frictionless, willpower becomes unreliable. You can resist temptation a few times, maybe a dozen times, but modern life exposes you to spending triggers hundreds of times every week. Promotional emails, Amazon recommendations, flash sales, Target end cap displays, food delivery notifications at 9:30 p.m. Each one asks your brain to make a decision. And decision-making is exhausting. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. The more choices you make during the day, the worse your judgment becomes. By evening, your brain wants the easiest option available. Convenience wins. That's why so many purchases happen late at night. You're tired, you're scrolling your phone, and a product appears that promises a small improvement to your life. Better coffee, better kitchen tools, better organization. The purchase takes seconds. The consequence takes months to notice. This is why relying on discipline almost always fails. You're not fighting your own habits. You're fighting an entire environment designed to separate you from your money. And the environment has a massive advantage, which is why financially stable people rarely rely on discipline alone. Instead, they design systems that make spending slightly harder, systems that make saving automatic, systems that remove the constant decisions that drain willpower. Once those systems exist, behavior changes almost automatically. Not because the person suddenly became more disciplined, but because the environment stopped pushing them towards spending. Small purchases feel harmless because the numbers look small. A $14 coffee run doesn't feel like a financial decision. A $23 lunch upgrade doesn't trigger concern. A $19 Amazon order barely registers in your mind. But small spending has a property that large spending doesn't. It repeats. Imagine a simple pattern that many people follow without noticing. Coffee on the way to work. Lunch instead of the meal you packed. A small online purchase while scrolling your phone at night. Nothing dramatic. Just 3 transactions in a single day. Average cost might look like this. $14 coffee and breakfast. $22 lunch instead of the food you packed. $18 a small Amazon purchase. That's $54 in one day. On its own, that number feels manageable. But habits rarely happen once. They repeat quietly. If that pattern happens 5 days per week, the math changes quickly. About $270 per week. Over a month, that becomes roughly $1,080. Over a year, more than $13,000 disappears through purchases that individually felt insignificant. And this is where the real cost becomes visible. That same $13,000 per year, invested into a simple S&P 500 index fund, historically earning about 7% annually, compounds dramatically. Over 20 years, that habit could grow into more than $500,000, which means those tiny daily decisions are not just small purchases. They are trades. Every coffee, every convenience order, every impulsive online purchase. You're not just buying an item. You're exchanging future financial freedom for a moment of convenience today. And once you see the math clearly, the real problem becomes obvious. Overspending rarely looks dangerous. It looks ordinary. Once you understand the pattern, the next question becomes obvious. How do you stop it? Most people try the same strategy. They promise themselves they'll be more careful. They decide they'll spend less. They tell themselves the next month will be different. But nothing structural changes. The same apps remain on the phone. The same marketing emails arrive every morning. The same frictionless purchasing systems remain in place. So the behavior returns, not because the person is weak, but because the environment didn't change. Financially disciplined people approach the problem differently. They don't try to resist spending hundreds of times per month. They change the conditions that create those purchases in the first place. Instead of relying on willpower, they install habits that alter the system around them. Simple rules that automatically slow spending down. For example, create a waiting rule before buying anything non-essential. If an item costs less than $50, wait 1 full day. Between $50 and $200, wait 3 days. Anything above $200 waits at least a week. That pause alone eliminates many impulse purchases because desire fades quickly once time passes. Another habit is removing the triggers that create unnecessary spending. Unsubscribe from promotional emails. Delete shopping apps that make purchases effortless. When buying something requires opening a browser, logging in, and entering payment information manually, the extra friction forces reconsideration. Other habits create awareness. Checking your bank balance every morning takes less than 30 seconds, but that daily awareness changes how you behave throughout the day. And some habits restructure spending entirely. Using cash for discretionary categories, restaurants, entertainment, shopping, creates a visible limit. When the envelope is empty, spending stops. None of these habits require extraordinary discipline. They simply reshape the environment so that thoughtful spending becomes the default. Overspending isn't just about money. It's about psychology. Human decision-making was never designed for an environment where buying something takes 3 seconds. For most of history, spending required effort. You had to travel to a store, look at the item, hand over physical money. That process slowed the brain down. Today, purchases happen in the same place you relax. On the same device you use to watch videos, check messages, and scroll social media, which means spending is constantly mixed with emotion. And emotions change how people make financial decisions. Stress increases spending. When people feel overwhelmed, the brain looks for quick relief. Buying something small creates a short burst of dopamine. The brain interprets that burst as a reward, but the relief is temporary. The financial consequence appears later. Boredom works the same way. Scrolling online stores or shopping apps becomes a form of entertainment. The purchase isn't really about the product. It's about filling a quiet moment. Even positive emotions can trigger spending. Celebration, excitement, feeling good after accomplishing something. All of these reduce caution and increase the willingness to spend. And there's another factor most people underestimate: the pain of paying. When you hand someone $40 in cash, your brain registers a loss. But tapping a credit card or clicking a purchase button removes that sensation. The transaction becomes abstract. Numbers move on a screen. Nothing physically leaves your hand. Because that discomfort disappears, people consistently spend more when using cards than when using cash. None of this means people are irresponsible. It means the brain responds predictably to its environment. Understanding those responses changes how you design your financial habits. Because once you recognize the psychological triggers behind spending, you stop blaming yourself for them and start building systems that work with human behavior instead of against it. Most financial advice begins at the wrong place. It starts with investing. Buy index funds. Max out your 401k. Build a diversified portfolio. All of that matters. But none of it works if the money never survives long enough to be invested. Before wealth can grow, money has to stay. And for many people, that's the real problem. The money doesn't disappear because of one catastrophic mistake. It disappears slowly. A food delivery order on a tired evening. A small Amazon purchase while scrolling your phone. A handful of subscriptions quietly renewing every month. Individually harmless, collectively destructive, which is why the goal isn't perfection. You don't need to eliminate every small purchase. You don't need extreme frugality. What you need is awareness and structure. A few systems that close the most obvious leaks. Remove the triggers that constantly invite spending. Add small amounts of friction between wanting something and buying it. Make saving automatic so it happens without effort. And make your financial progress visible so restraint actually feels rewarding. Once those systems exist, something interesting happens. The constant pressure around money begins to fade because your financial life stops depending on hundreds of tiny decisions every week. The systems handle most of the work. The money that used to vanish begins to stay. And when money stays, something else appears. Margin. Margin creates flexibility. Flexibility creates choices. And in the end, that's what financial stability actually provides. Not luxury, not status, but the quiet ability to decide how your time and your life are spent.